Welcome in everybody to Play Like a Jet Live, another week brought to you by U Stadium. And we've got some news to talk about, Clay. It may be a quiet part of the but we've actually had a little bit happening in the Jets universe. So first off, how are you going and what have you been up to this week?
I'm doing good, man. I'm just ready. It's just like we took last week off because there wasn't a lot to talk about because the week before it was just us two talking about the Jets. And I think, what was it, the day after they signed Morgan Moses?
Yeah.
So and then now, with him, I'm just ready. I'm ready for the season.
Yeah, I can't wait for it either. We've got a really good show for you today, guys. We've got PFF's Austin Gayle coming on in a few minutes to talk about their system, the Jets offseason, what he thought of the Moses Morgan signing. So let's start there, Clay, while we're waiting. It was the big news that happened last week. He was signed to a 1-year, $3.6 million deal with some incentives based on playing time to get upwards of $5 million. So based on our prior conversations on the show, I'm guessing you were as ecstatic as I was about it. So just run me through your thoughts when you saw it, the value of the deal, and where your mind's at now.
Yeah, so when they announced that they were signing him, obviously I was ecstatic. I was I lied. I was driving home. I had no idea it happened. And then Scott texted me. He's like, "Hey, you want to write up with Morgan Moses? You want to write up a piece real quick?" I'm like, what do you mean? What just happened?" And then Scott actually broke the news to me. But yeah, I was ecstatic. Obviously, it's been talked about for a couple weeks now. They actually were talking about a multi-year deal, which I said in my piece that I released once they did sign him. But they wound up doing 1 year, 3.6 can go up to 5.3, I believe. So at that value, I think it's incredible.
Yeah.
We just saw the deal that Ryan Ramczyk just got, 5 years, $96 million, making him the fifth highest paid offensive tackle in the league, whereas Morgan Moses is probably around that 30 mark. And I think he is 100% better than the 30th best tackle in this league. So the value alone, I think, is incredible. Now it's just a question of, what do you want to do with George Fant? Do you want to have him be the swing tackle, or is he going to kind of be competing for that right guard position? That still remains to be seen. I think he'll ultimately be the swing tackle. But it's great to see. Like, Joe Douglas, when he first came in, said he wanted to build through the trenches. And he stuck to his word. Granted, last year didn't work out exactly how we anticipated. We thought Conor Mcgovern would be a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree.
Nick. Yeah, we thought McGovern would be a little bit better. George, I always want to say Van Roten, Greg Van Roten. Obviously, like, he had his ups and downs. He was a quality pass protector, but terrible in the run game. And George Fant, granted, he was better. He was much better than I anticipated when he first came in, but it still wasn't very good. So obviously, it didn't work out in 2020, but they are trying to make it work now. They bring in Morgan Moses after already drafting Elijah Vera-Tucker to team up with Mekhi Becton. It looks good. I think McGovern is going to take a next step forward. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I agree with you on that last point you made. Conor Mcgovern is going to be helped the most out of the Jets offensive line by the system. I think he's going to excel here. This is what he used in Denver, a lot of the play action passing where he was really good in pass pro, but also climbing to the second level on combo blocks, on inside-outside zone. That's what he does well. With Morgan Moses, you mentioned George Fant's contract. If you flipped those deals, I would have no problem at all. I think that's a pretty good assessment of where they are as players. If they decided they wanted to pay Morgan Moses $8 or $9 million because they really wanted to solidify that position, I would have been completely fine with it. So to get him between 3.6 and 5.3 is just great value. I did a couple of breakdowns on his pass pro and also his run blocking. And if you haven't been to Play Like a Jets YouTube, make sure you jump over and check that out. But I was so impressed with both against TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, and Shaq Barrett. They left him on an island. They weren't shipping tight ends or bringing running backs out of the backfield to help out. It was man-to-man, go for it, you protect our quarterback. And then in the run game, people say he's not a great athlete or maybe he's not as good a fit in the scheme as George Fant. Washington used him a ton on these pin and pulls, getting him out in space, inside, outside zone. His ability to seal on backside plays for outside zones when they're running to the left behind Mekhi Becton in this instance was fantastic. So I think he's a great scheme fit, and I'm super excited to have him here. I guess the question I have for you, Clay might not be with us anymore. I think he might have dropped out, but we're talking about Morgan Moses, who just signed with the Jets last week on a 3.5 million deal with incentives to get more than that. We're going to be joined by Austin Gayle from PFF soon, who's going to jump on and talk about the signing and some of the other things. The effort that Joe Douglas has made this offseason to build the offensive line, starting last year with Mekhi Becton all the way up until today with Elijah Vera-Tucker and Morgan Moses, it kind of poses the question, was there a lack of urgency last year in that regard because they didn't have faith in Sam Darnold? Was the long-term plan from Joe Douglas and co maybe to not tank last year, but not to win, see if Sam Darnold could resurrect the franchise? And if he couldn't, well, no worries at all. Then we're going to move on and get to a quarterback, and that's what happened here. So it's an interesting conversation. I'm not saying he necessarily did that, but he definitely has made the moves now to solidify the offensive line around it. So what we're going to do now, guys, we're going to bring in Austin Gayle. Clay will be back shortly. He's just logging back on. So we're going to bring in Austin from PFF's 2-for-1 drafts, and we're going to have a bit of a chat about the New York Jets. Austin, man, how you going?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Look, I know you're going through a bit of a rebrand at the moment with 2-for-1 drafts. A lot of people that listen to our show listen to you. So where's it at? What kind of stage are you at? And what can we expect moving forward?
Yeah, we've made the decision to rebrand. We have a new name and some new logo concepts and some new things coming down the pipeline. We're really excited about it. I think we should see the decision or some of the rebrand elements start to take place as soon as mid to late July. We're really excited about it. I mean, I think the biggest reason for it, honestly, was to take 2-for-1 drafts, a podcast that specializes in rookies content and draft prospects content, and expand it further. I think covering more of college football, covering more of the NFL, covering betting and other things like that. We're really excited about it.
That's awesome. So off the top of the show, Austin, we were talking about Morgan Moses. That was the big signing for the Jets in the last week. I know in Steve Palazzolo's rankings earlier in the offseason, he had the Jets around 25th or 26th as a unit. And he actually prefaced that if they signed Morgan Moses, that would see a pretty large jump for them. I wanted to get your thoughts, not an exact number, but where you think this Jets offensive line is, and if they've crept back towards kind of that average that everyone's talking about with PFF.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Morgan Moses, coming off a career year specifically as a run blocker in the system he was in this past year, he's also been consistently an average to above average pass blocker in his career, now 30 years old. I think he brings stability, and when you talk about creeping towards average along the offensive line, something that I think about a ton as well is raise the floor of your offensive line, because it's such a weak link position group. You can have 4 elite offensive linemen at left tackle, left guard, right guard, and center. But if your right tackle is a subpar or significantly below average player, it's going to get exposed. It's going to force you to do different things offensively. Morgan Moses does exactly that, in that he raises the floor, the depth, and the starting caliber ability of this offensive line. I'd put them probably in the top 18 range, close to 16. I don't know if I'm ready to call them top half of the league. I think you need a lot of development from Mekhi Becton. You need a lot of quick hitting the ground running with Elijah Vera-Tucker and these other guys. Morgan Moses, though, raises the floor of this offense. I think it's a very exciting offensive line. It's a very exciting offense overall. I mean, this Jets team, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about the New York Jets. Probably most importantly, the philosophical change you're seeing in some of the decision-making they've had. I wasn't in love with the decision to trade up for Elijah Vera-Tucker, but they're still targeting outstanding players, both in free agency and in the draft. I think Joe Douglas, Robert Salah, they're doing a lot of positive things there in New York. There's a lot of reasons to be excited, a lot of reasons to be optimistic.
It's funny, you just mentioned raising the floor, Austin, and actually a question I had written down was, if you were building an offensive line and you say you could have 2 players like Zach Martin and that caliber of elite offensive line, you'd have 2 George Fants, who's a bottom 5 player at his position, and then 1 league average. Or you could have 5 guys like Kelvin Beachum, who's an average tackle. Which direction would you go if you had the decision to choose one of those 2 groups?
This might be crazy, but I'd lean the Kelvin Beachum area. I do think that that's what matters more. I love Quentin Nelson. I love a Zach Martin. I love, Trent Williams, the guy that was the highest graded offensive tackle in the NFL last year, according to PFF. But the weak links are what kill you, because defenses don't care if you have a Jonathan Ogden at left tackle. They're not going to target him. They're going to put their worst pass rusher against him. They're going to go against these other guys, these George Fants that you have along the offensive line, and they're going to win that way. Run stunts to put them in a bad position, do different things so that way they're targeting your weak links, just as offenses do the same exact thing. Would you rather have, an elite corner at left side, say a Darrelle Revis in his prime, and then 2, a slot corner, another outside corner that maybe were below league average or significantly below league average? That's not a good position to be in, because you're going to get consistently exposed. It reminds me of, honestly, I'm an Oakland Raiders fan. I'm born and raised in Oakland. I went to these games. I had season tickets with my dad for a long time. Nnamdi Asomugha in his prime, he would average 2 targets per game. He would not get thrown at. He never got picks. But the opposite of him was Chris Johnson and Chimdi Chekwa, these guys that would just absolutely get exposed. And they had one of the worst passing defenses in the NFL because of it. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a Darrelle Revis at corner, if your other 2 corners aren't good. For the same reason, it doesn't matter if you have a Jonathan Ogden at left tackle, but say the interior or other tackle is significantly below average.
Yeah, I think that's a huge step forward for the Jets. And I really agree with your philosophy that the weakest link on the O-line and in the corner positions, that's going to be where teams are going to target. And that's why depth, for example, with Tampa Bay, looking at what they did in the secondary, was so great for their Super Bowl run last year. That's the offensive line. Clay, welcome back in, had some technical difficulties.
Yeah.
I know you wanted to discuss, obviously, the biggest move that the Jets made this year was getting Zach Wilson with the number 2 pick, Clay, and just getting the thoughts on the offseason. So if you want to lead into Austin and just kind of dive into the Jets offseason as a whole.
Yeah, and you might have kind of spoken about it when I was gone. Obviously, I couldn't hear you guys. But, yeah, I want to see what your thoughts were on Joe Douglas. Like, when he first came in, and we spoke about it right before you joined, he wanted to build through the trenches, and it seems like he's doing that. And I wanted to get your thoughts on how you view his decision-making is for the offense in particular, leaving the defense out of it for now.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention, some of the defensive signings that they have made, Sheldon Rankins, Carl Lawson. I like some of the decisions there. But in the draft, obviously, Zach Wilson was the player to take there at number 2 overall. He was the second best quarterback in PFF's opinion. He was the second best quarterback among other opinions as well. He's also the first ranked quarterback according to Chris Sims' board as well. So a lot of people big fans of what Zach Wilson brings to the table. I think offensively, Mekhi Becton, Elijah Vera Tucker, 2 really outstanding offensive linemen. I'd say high ceiling offensive lineman in addition to high floor, just knowing that how big Mekhi Becton is and how good he was already. Like, that was so impressive this past year when healthy. And I think health is going to be massive for a guy as big as Mekhi Becton. It's going to be, it's a statistical scientific fact that it is harder to stay healthy when you're that monstrous. That is a fact. So hopefully he can stay healthy and find ways to stay healthy. And for Elijah Vera Tucker, not only can he, I think, have, top 5, top 6 guard play in the NFL, but I don't think he'll ever pan out to be a bottom 30, a bottom 20, bottom 25 player, because I do think the floor of what he's capable of is really special. He was someone that I think everyone liked in the pre-draft process. And other signings that they made, I think the Corey Davis, getting him at the average, value per year that they got for him was absolutely absurd. I think that was a slam dunk of a deal, especially with Corey Davis coming off of what was a career year. Adding Elijah Moore, who's arguably one of the better route runners, one of the better creators or yards creators drafted in the 2021 NFL draft. I think those moves have been great. And what he's doing is, and I had this conversation a ton on the podcast 2-for-1 Drafts, is that the number one question for the New York Jets right now is not how many games they will win, not if they're going to the playoffs, if they're turning this around, is it can we win with Zach Wilson? That is the number one question when you get a quarterback on a rookie contract. Can you win when the situation is ideal, if not near ideal? Can you win with this quarterback on a rookie contract? That's a question that the previous regime completely failed to answer with Sam Darnold. But no one knows how good Sam Darnold is. No one knows how good he could be. People are blaming Adam Gase, the offensive line, the receiving core, injuries. He's too young. No one knows, because they never put him in a position, due to the decisions they made as in the draft and in free agency, to actually see if they can win with him. The contract for C.J. Mosley was an unmitigated disaster. The contract for Le'Veon Bell, unmitigated disaster. You uniquely failed to develop a young quarterback or even validate some of the pre-draft mentions that you had. You saw flashes of Sam Darnold here and there, struggled to keep him healthy, struggled to keep his head on straight. And now I think you're going to see a much improved Sam Darnold there in Carolina. So this regime, I think, is taking it right. Joe Douglas specifically is making good decisions, just decisions with the situation they're in. It's not about making the playoffs or making the Super Bowl for the Jets in 2021. It's about finding out, can they put Zach Wilson in a position to succeed? Because the other teams that have done that. Baltimore Ravens completely changing their offensive philosophy in 6 months because Lamar Jackson was drafted. Brian Dable doing everything he could to pull the strings to put Josh Allen in a position to succeed. Obviously, Allen proved as well, but they did what they had to do, involve quarterback runs, put him in a position to win. And I think the same could be said for Kevin Stefanski and Baker Mayfield. Those are all quarterbacks from the 2018 class. They were given an opportunity to succeed by their decision makers and offense coordinators.
Let's stay on the quarterbacks for a second, Austin, because I know you and Mike have done a couple of really good shows on sticky points with data and what translates from year to year and from college to the pros. Obviously, no one really knows perfectly what that model's like for the quarterback position because the NFL has such a terrible hit rate in general in the first round with quarterbacks. But what were some of the things that Zach Wilson did really well coming out of college? And did he excel in any of those areas off the top of your head that really do translate well from college to the NFL?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was that in his last season at BYU, all of the kind of sticky data points we look for at the quarterback position, he excelled in. Obviously, you want a larger sample size. You go back to Baker Mayfield, 3 years of highly graded play, specifically from a clean pocket, very accurate with the football. That's what you look for when you're looking at quarterback play. For Zach Wilson, it all happened 1 year, and it was really good. Accuracy at the intermediate level when kept clean, PFF passing grade on non-play action plays. A lot of people bring up the offensive system he was in and how it was limiting, and he won't see some of that stuff. No, I think Zach Wilson, when you control for scheme, when you control for situation, control for pressure versus no pressure, he was one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And I think that can that happen in the NFL? Because a lot of PFF's grading and all that stuff is not opponent adjusted. You're looking at BYU versus the teams you play, and you can only play the teams on your schedule. But still, you like to see Zach Wilson do it against heightened competition in the NFL. That's going to be the biggest jump, in my opinion. The game gets faster for every quarterback going from college to the NFL, but it's going to get a lot faster when you go from BYU to the NFL. So I think, can he have that same level of success as an accurate quarterback, the big arm quarterback down the football field, out of structure, all that stuff when the game does get faster? And you probably won't find that out for the first 4 to 8 weeks, but can you eventually make that turn to where he is processing the game as fast as you need to, and that way able to deliver on the unique ability he has from an accuracy and arm strength standpoint?
Clay, you had DJ on a couple of weeks ago, new Jets beat reporter, and DJ raved about Zach Wilson, which must have hurt him because he's a Dolphins fan. But Clay, everything sounds like it's going pretty well at camp, and what we saw in college has started well with OTAs and minicamp.
Yeah, I mean, DJ, he's been one thing I like about him. He's real. He's not like a guy that's trying to feed into the Jets fans, trying to make them feel better. Like, he's real about his thoughts, and he just said straight out, like, Zach Wilson, yeah, he's playing well right now. It's early. Everyone's playing in shorts. There's no offensive line. These linebackers aren't playing the way they want to play. But from what he's seen so far, Zach Wilson is playing well, and I think it's only going to improve. And I think LaFleur is a smart enough guy, and I know Saleh is a smart enough guy to know, like, they're not going to force him into something that he isn't. They're going to make him they're going to try to help him out every way. And Saleh said it when he drafted him, like, this team's going to lift you, not the other way around. And I just love that philosophy. And I think with Wilson's kind of like how he prepares for the game, how he's just a football nut, I think it's just gonna be a perfect match. And granted, like, we've been let down before as Jets fans, so I'm not gonna get my hopes up too high. But I think everything's just looking good right now, and I really do believe that Wilson. Austin, you kind of just said it. The first 4 to 8 weeks, like, he might struggle with a little bit with processing, just because it is a different game. Like, you're not playing Coastal Carolina anymore. You're playing the Buffalo Bills. You're playing Miami, like Brian Flores, Bill Belichick. You're going against these coaches instead. So that's one thing I'm very curious to see in the early parts of the season. But I'm still excited.
Austin, I wanted to pivot the conversation now to what you guys do at PFF. Have an incredible product. I think there's sometimes some give and take on Twitter with people loving your content when they're supporting your team and being super critical when the numbers and the data don't pick up their teams. They like to pick and choose, their arguments with PFF. And you see it all the time, and I'm sure you get that in your mentions and in your DMs. I wondered whether you could quickly give us a bit of a rundown of when you're grading a player, for example, what does that process look like for you? I know you guys went to a new grading scale a few years ago. Maybe just give the guys a bit of an insight into what you guys do when you're grading players and what that process looks like.
Yeah, PFF, its foundation is on trying to identify data in the NFL or metrics in the NFL that are more stable or more valuable to decision makers in the NFL. We originally, when PFF was founded to create, collect and analyze data that made it better for decision makers in the NFL to call fourth downs, draft players, sign players, trade players, make those decisions and target those NFL teams. And now, obviously, we work with all 32 NFL teams, over 100 college football teams, I think nearly half the Canadian Football League, and among several high schools as well, because that data has turned out to be very valuable. So every player on every play in every game gets graded from -2 to +2 at 0.5 increments. -2 being the worst play you've ever seen, +2 being the best play you've ever seen. That 0 in the middle there is meeting expectations. An expectation for every position is different. For every situation is different. If you get the handoff on the goal line and there's a wide open hole and you can walk into the end zone untouched, that's not a +1 touchdown. That's not a +1.5 touchdown. That's a 0. You're expected given that situation. And there's a handful of other situations you can dive into, but then you take that raw score of added up from -2 to +2, all the scores you get in every single play, normalize it on a bell curve, and then normalize it to fit 0 to 100 grades, then that's what you come out with, an 89.5 and those types of things. And it's like everyone has, criticism with PFF grades, especially when it doesn't align with maybe what people saw or what people think they saw on broadcast film and that type of stuff. My takeaway always is that PFF grading is subjective within a framework that is so rigid that PFF grades are more valuable and more stable year over year than passer rating, yards per carry, tackles per carry, or tackles missed, all that type of stuff. PFF grades are more stable year over year, therefore more valuable and more impactful for future decisions. And that's what we're trying to do. Everyone that's an NFL fan, a fantasy football player, a bettor, a GM is trying to predict future player performance, to predict future wins. And when PFF grades are more stable than some of these other traditional data that we've been looking at, like yards per carry, yards per attempt, touchdowns, rushing yards, total tackles, that's when it becomes valuable. And while it's not perfect and far from it, it's the best we have right now, and it's only going to continue to improve as we identify areas for it.
Yeah. One game that just stood out to me as you're talking about the scale and 0 being meeting expectations. You're probably not going to remember this, but a couple of years ago, Bilal Powell was playing Jacksonville. He had a couple of 60-yard touchdowns, one where he fell over, got up and ran and scored a touchdown, and he graded like 70 for the game. And people were like, are you kidding me? He had 2 80-yard touchdowns. He did this, he did that, but he wasn't touched on either touchdown, and he was pretty much expected to go to the house on both of those plays. So I think that's where some of the miscommunication is between PFF and the fans, and not quite understanding the concept as a whole. Austin, correct me if
I do think that overall, I do think that overall, like, I think that is the most important piece, when you're looking at PFF grading and what looks like when you normalize it to 0 100 is understanding what is expected of a player. What is the expectation for a player in this role when he touches the ball, when he has it, and in a situation he's given.
Correct me if I'm wrong here. As far as when you look at the plays, if you throw an interception and you're up by 31 in the fourth quarter compared to it's 4th and goal and it's 26 all and you're driving to win the game, there's no scaling or weighting in the plays. The belief at PFF is the play is the play, and across 1,000 data points in the season, that will come to the front. Is that effectively how the system works?
100%. I think there's a lot of filtering that we do with our own data sets to filter out garbage time or filter out certain leads and that type of stuff. We do not change the data based on our subjective inference of where the game is or whether or not it's garbage time. We grade the play, and that's what the play was. However, if you want to look at how players graded with garbage time removed and all that type of stuff, that's something that you can definitely do.
Okay, that does make sense. Someone like Kirk Cousins, for example, has a lot of success in garbage times. That's always an interesting one. Probably the last question from me on the system, Austin, and what you guys do at PFF. Let's talk about quarterback play. So I think you guys grade the outcome, not so much the process of the play. So let's say the quarterback has a deep post, he passes it up, it's wide open, and then he hits the dig underneath for 15 yards. Do you guys take away points for that on that scale, on that -2 to 2 scale, or is it just kind of the outcome of what happens in the play?
Yeah, we grade the decision and the decision that he made, not always the decision he didn't make, largely because I think a lot of that is because it's very difficult to grade decisions they don't make. And there could be other things that they didn't see, that we didn't see, or that they're coached to do. I think you don't want to get into situations where, even if it's open, he's coached not to hit the post because it's 3rd and 9. You want to hit the dig underneath, that type of thing. I think we like to grade the decision, and it's not necessarily grading the outcome. It's more grading the process he made to get to that decision. And I think some of that times can be very valuable. And honestly, that's where some of our most predictive data is. Our most predictive data year over year in the NFL is our passing grades from a clean pocket, from an accuracy standpoint, how you're delivering the football, what's your average depth of target from a clean pocket. All of that data is very stable, and some of the most stable data across all positions that we collect.
One question? Go for it, Clay.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to, like you said, like you're grading players on what's expected, and I'm trying to think, like, is it like the same play? Can it be expected? Can the same expectation be held for, like, say, Mike Tolbert and Chris Johnson, CJ2K? Like, obviously Tolbert, like, he's not nearly as quick, he's not nearly as fast, but like if there's an open hole, like, is he expected to hit it at like the same time that Chris Johnson is? Like, that's
honestly a fantastic question. Right now it's expected based on the position, not necessarily how fast or slow you are. So I think it's an interesting wrinkle. I think it's like, hey, all running backs are expected to hit the hole and gain, X amount of yards on, say it's 3rd and 1 and there's an open hole. There's an expectation to hit it. If you're Mike Tolbert and you don't hit it, yeah, you're going to grade poorly. It's like, dude, you gotta make some plays here. Why are you running Mike Tolbert if you can't hit the hole as well as, maybe others can, or can't hit at least an expected hole for the running back position itself? I think that's where, there's conversations around, complete backs and bringing guys that maybe have a specific skill set and those types of things. Like, no, the skill set you want is the one that that wins every time. The one that wins every time, I think, is something that's super important for us. But it's an interesting conversation. I think there's opportunities in PFF's filtering right now to, let's limit, running backs over 220 pounds from the sample and look at success rates and those types of things. Let's limit running backs under 200 pounds and look at just the bigger boys and see what they do there. I think that's something that's very interesting. Something that as PFF learns more, and I think a lot of this work is being done by our VP of Research and Development, Eric Eager. You can follow him on Twitter at PFF_Eric. What he has done and what he has realized is that while PFF grades are so valuable and they are so stable, some of the most predictive stuff in the NFL right now is height, weight, size. And so much of that is speed and because, Dale Jeremiah, I was talking to him, I think at the Senior Bowl, obviously last year, but the year before. And he was one of the first people to put Mekhi Becton inside the top 5 or top 10 in his mock draft. And he said he talked to coaches and scouts and he said, hey, Mekhi Becton's going to show up to practice and maybe he has a bad one. And it doesn't play well and needs to improve. But the next day, what Mekhi Becton's going to do? He's going to wake up at 6'8", 360 pounds. That doesn't change. Physicality does not change. Height, weight does not change. And that's what makes it more stable.
All right, one last question before you have to jump off, Austin. Who wins more games this year, the New York Jets or the Las Vegas Raiders?
Oh my goodness, that is a tough question. I honestly do think that the Las Vegas Raiders win more games. And what's tough is that you talk about a team where the floor has risen. There's not a lot of excuses for this team offensively to be bad. They've done a lot offensively. I know the offensive line has taken some steps back, but like Derek Carr, 3rd or 4th year now with John Gruden. They add John Brown. They have Henry Ruggs entering year 2. They have a top 2, top 3 tight end in the NFL. And I don't think their offensive line is nearly as bad as maybe some people are perceiving it with the losses of Trent Brown, Gabe Jackson, and Rodney Hudson losing their 3 starters there. I do think that it will creep back maybe towards average, maybe still be a top 20 offensive line, but there are no excuses. The problem is defensively, this team has not gotten better in maybe 5 years. I don't think this defense has significantly improved. It's not just gotten worse in the last 5 years. A lot of decision-making, a lot of head scratching with what some of the players that they've invested in, a misunderstanding, in my opinion, of positional value, misunderstanding of impact players and those types of things.
Yeah, definitely don't have a great understanding of the board and understanding you can pass someone up. And just because you value someone highly doesn't mean you can't get them 15 picks later in the draft. So That's something probably that stood out with Mike Mayock. Look, Austin, we really appreciate you coming on and giving us your time. Host of 2-for-1 Drafts, about to have a rebrand, director of content at PFF. Man, if anything else you want to tell us about your show, what's coming out, where can people find you, things like that?
Definitely continue listening to Play Like a Jet. This is a fantastic podcast. I really appreciate the time.
No, thank you, Austin. Appreciate you, man, and take care.
Thanks,
Clay, fantastic to have Austin on. He was awesome. And one thing we didn't touch on that I wanted to get into, and you've obviously got a good understanding of not only analytics in football, but also you're a big baseball guy as well. The question that I always wonder when you look at analytics is, do you think we're getting to a point where we're now eliminating the human element of sport? If I'm taking a free throw in the second quarter of a game in the 60th regular season game of a basketball game compared to in the NBA finals with 2 minutes left, that pressure and the human elements, form, confidence, do you think those are kind of being ignored in this analytics era and everything's just focused on the numbers and things like that?
Yeah, we're switching sports a little bit, but take the World Series last year with the Tampa Bay Rays and the Dodgers.
Yep.
Blake Snell was having an incredible game. And analytics said to take him out after, I think it was around 70 pitches, give or take, around 70 pitches. And they said to take him out. But why are you taking him out if he's on fire in a high pressure situation like the World Series? So like that stuff where I'm a big numbers guy. I have a degree in mathematics. I love looking at numbers, but numbers can only tell you so much. And it does take away the human element, because the human element will tell you, keep Blake Snell in, let him dominate and try to get you this World Series win. And it didn't work out for them, obviously. So as much as I love numbers and looking at them, it takes away a little bit from the game itself.
Yeah, see, I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum to you. So my background is in coaching. I have a degree in coaching, right? So when I look at some of the decisions, I'm with you on the World Series, and Splash, our producer, is talking about the third time through the order and things like that obviously make a huge difference for baseball pitchers. But I come back to even matchups, for example. Maybe Aaron Judge is 1 for 6 against Adam Ottavino or someone like that, and they pinch hit for him. But that could have been 3 years ago when Aaron Judge was on a cold streak. He might have been sick. He might have been having issues with his girlfriend in that game. Like, I think sometimes we overlook the human element of sport. But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting kind of discussion to jump into after we finished with Austin.
Yeah, there was actually one other thing I wanted to mention to him too, was possibly was the Lamarcus Joyner signing. Obviously, he came from the Raiders. He's a big Raiders fan. Yeah. And I think Joyner's going to have a pretty big impact on this team this year, being the nickelback. Sorry, my dog just got let in the room. I haven't seen her in a couple weeks, but so I was kind of curious to see his thoughts on that, because I think Joyner is going to have a big impact on this defense, and I think he will play the free safety position rather than the nickel corner spot that he played in Las Vegas and Oakland. But unfortunately, he had to run, and I don't know. And hopefully, we'll get another chance to talk to him before the season starts, or maybe during the season.
Yeah, Austin's an awesome guy. And while we're talking about Joyner, I thought it was interesting. Aldrich, in his press conference leaving minicamp, I believe it was, talked about how he sees him fitting in that Jimmy Ward role. So Jimmy Ward played free safety in 2019 for the 49ers that year. They were so dominant, but would often come down and play over the top of a slot receiver. He may play one-on-one with a tight end. So there was still quite a lot of man principles, even though he was playing free safety. They utilized him in that role. So I think he's going to be a perfect skill set. And I think people are really undervaluing the Jets' safety position as a whole, because Ashton Davis, I think, can be a really good player still. He wasn't great in his first year. Not many defensive backs are. Jamal Adams struggled in his first year in the NFL. So I think those three guys can be a top 10 safety group in the NFL. I think they're getting overshadowed by how raw and average the cornerback play looks, and people are kind of lumping them together. But I think it's a really good group, Clay.
And I love how you use the word average, because I know 99% of the world would not use average to describe the Jets cornerback room. But no, I mean, I'm kind of with you there. Like, I really do like Joyner and what he can bring to this defense. Marcus May, obviously, we know what he can do. Ashton Davis, I know Splash might hate me after this, but I wasn't a big fan of his. I thought the value was fine of where they took him. It was still a little too early for me, and he had some struggles last year. Obviously, he's obviously last year he dealt with some problems like in the deep parts of the field, but I don't think they're really going to have him play there, and they're not going to have him play out of position. They're going to put him in a spot to succeed, and I do think the safety group is going to be much improved. Bradley McDougald, obviously, he did not work. He was the one bad part of that Jamal Adams trade.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you there. I think the safety group is going to be good. The cornerback group just has to be at worst a little below average. They just can't be horrendous, and I think they'll be okay.
And that's going to be helped by the front four. I actually put a video up on Play Like a Jet YouTube channel last night talking about how the Jets will have a top 10 defensive line in the NFL. So make sure you're heading over and check that out. Check out our podcast with Scott Mason, Play Like a Jet. Make sure you're jumping on Apple, subscribing, places you find your podcast. And make sure you're following Clay, myself on Twitter, the whole Play Like a Jet team, jumping across to playlikeajet.com, and everyone at U Stadium. Nick, Frankie, Splash, and the guys are doing a terrific job. So make sure you're supporting everyone that makes this show come to light. So Clay, I think that'll do us for today. We've got a huge couple of weeks coming up. We've got Tim Jenkins coming on to talk about Zach Wilson. Does a fantastic job with quarterback evaluation. Got Alex Rowlands coming on, who's huge on YouTube side of it, and the football analyst. Does a great job breaking down the 49ers defense. So we're going to bring him on, but I'm really excited about these next few weeks before training camp.
Yeah, it should be fun. I forget the exact day the training camp starts, but yeah, we got Tim Jenkins coming up next, and we're staying busy. Like I said in my tweet yesterday, like the NFL's slow, but we're staying busy, and I think I'm still working on one guest in particular that I think would be pretty fun to have on. But yeah, I think we got an exciting rest of the off season until training camp hits, and then preseason, and then before you know it, it's week one, opening week. I'm just counting down the days, man.
And as always, we're lobbying for Michael Carter II to come on the show as well. Don't think we're forgetting about you, Michael. Come on the show.
Nick.
So that will do it for Play Like a Jet Live this week, guys. Huge thanks to our producer Splash working behind the scenes as always. Clay, it has been a pleasure. We're going to catch you guys next week with an episode with Tim Jenkins. Really looking forward to that one. Make sure you're checking us out on social media, and we'll see you next week.